I hope you don't. Um, okay, thank you, Nicholas. So my name is Carolina Maisch. I'm joining you today from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, and I'm the co-president of the Polish Studies Association. And my other half is Jan Musekamp, who is joining us from the German Historical Institute in Warsaw. And we're delighted to have you all here today for this exciting event. So just a few words for those of you who don't know us. We are the Polish Studies Association, organization of scholars, publishers, librarians, archivists, journalists, whoever really has an academic or professional interest in the study of Poland is welcome in our organization. And if you're not yet a member, I hope you will be. I will post a link to our website later. We do a number of different things. We do organize a lot of events. We have recently, at least, some book discussions and this roundtable. And we also give out awards, or we don't give them out, you apply for them. We have competitions for a dissertation prize, best article prize, and also, for example, the syllabus. We have a syllabus competition, and this event came out of the responses, the great syllabi we got from this competition last time. We also have an upcoming event I just want to mention briefly, and that's on April 13th from 6 to 7 p.m. European time. We will be discussing Anna Dobrowolska's book, Polish Sexual Revolutions, Negotiating Sexuality and Modernity Behind the Iron Curtain. And we also have spring elections coming up. So if you are interested in becoming a board member, please let us know. We will be issuing another call, I believe, with some details, but contact us if you're interested. And now I think I will just hand it over to Nicholas Wieland, who is also a board member of the Polish Studies Association and who has organized this event today. So, Nicholas,
Great.
go ahead.
Thank you, Carolina. So, dzień dobry or dobry wieczór, depending on which part of the world you find yourself in right now. My name's Nicholas Weiland. I'm a PhD candidate in history at Harvard University. And as Carolina just mentioned, I'm a graduate student representative on the PSA's board. I'd like to welcome you all to this roundtable. And we're very pleased to have a really interesting set of speakers lined up for this teaching roundtable, which will showcase innovative courses in Polish history and Polish studies, and then culminate in a broader conversation about pedagogy in the field that we hope will continue in the future. So we envision this event as a sort of first round in a set of interdisciplinary conversations about teaching that will continue in the future. Some, but not all of the speakers on this roundtable are people who submitted syllabi for the last cycle of the PSA's syllabus prize competition, which runs every 2 years and, as Carolina also just underscored, will be held again this fall. So stay tuned for that. The basic plan for today is as follows. I'm going to introduce each of the speakers in turn before their individual presentations. So we'll first hear from Christoph Maisch and Friedrich Cain, then from Keely Stauter-Halsted, thereafter from Michał Wilczewski, and then from Vladyslava Moskalets. For about 5 minutes or so, these speakers will briefly present a recent course that they're either teaching right now or have taught in the past in Polish history or Polish studies. Then, after all of them have presented, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience and a general discussion for the remaining time that we have. So this will run roughly for an hour and a half, but I understand that some of you might have to leave a little earlier. During the question and answer period, people who want to ask questions can either use the raise their hand function on Zoom or they can pose their questions in the chat, whichever they prefer. So without further ado, I'd like to start by introducing our first two speakers, Christoph Maisch and Friedrich Cain. Christoph Maisch is a postdoctoral researcher and science manager specializing in interdisciplinary Central and Eastern European studies, with a focus on political theory, gender studies, and the history and philosophy of science. He completed his PhD at the European University Viadrina with a dissertation on Ludwig Fleck and Polish critical theory, and has held research and coordination positions in several Polish-German academic institutions. His work combines teaching, research, and international project management, particularly in transnational and multilingual academic settings. Friedrich Cain works as a postdoctoral assistant at the University of Vienna. He is a historian and specializes in the history of science and the humanities. His research focuses on the history of science studies and also on alternative universities in Central and Eastern Europe, especially in Poland. He completed his doctorate at the University of Konstanz on the history of clandestine research by Polish scientists under German occupation during World War II. So, Christoph and Friedrich, the floor is yours.
Yes, dobry wieczór or dzień dobry. Yeah, well, depending wherever you might be. Yeah, I am in Berlin at the moment, but yeah, this is Vienna time nonetheless. And let me just see how I can share my screen.
Yeah, you should be a co-host, so.
Yeah, just um, just pick the right. Yeah, all right. So lots of very small print. I'm afraid. Okay, so you can see that now, yeah? Okay, yeah, very good. So, yeah, sorry. Thanks for having us. Christoph and I, and with us, Vera Mieniok and Monika Janicka and Lothar Quinkenstein. The five of us organized a joint research seminar together in the summer term of 2023, quite a while ago. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide in very small, in fact, perhaps too small print, we did not only bring together five colleagues in a joint organizing team, but colleagues from five different universities in four European countries. And while Christoph will give you details on that and other things in a minute, I'll try to set the scene very briefly, or line out some of the general ideas. In fact, we started from the idea we wanted to create an atmosphere of learning in which students from different national backgrounds and different disciplinary backgrounds could engage in critical discourse and interdisciplinary discussion. So the group we had was comprised of late BA and also undergrad and graduate students. And they were coming from different fields. So I brought a group of historians, of very young historians from Vienna, from Frankfurt, and der Oder. There were people coming with backgrounds in cultural studies and Polish studies. Then in Lublin, where we actually met in the end, there were students from German studies, Germanistica, and then we had a group of students from Polish studies in Drohobych in Ukraine. And the idea was to discuss Galicia, or depending on the language you're coming from, Galician, Galician, Galicia, Galicia, in a diverse group with experiences from different, not only disciplines, but also memory cultures, because Galicia is it's a very or highly contested place as well historically. So, like over the last, well, let's say during the last century, it belonged to several countries and before as well, right? We couldn't meet in Galicia proper as for the war. So we met in Lublin, which we were very lucky to find out for, I think, 3 or 4 years also belonged to Galicia in the early 19th century. So we took that as reason enough to meet very close at least. With that, I hand over to Christoph.
Thank you, Friedrich. I hope you can all hear me. Thanks again for having me and having us. And the basic idea and the question we had was, what happens when we stop treating regions as stable entities and instead approach them as sites of competing narratives? That's how we came together with that groups. And this is what we focused on our approach to didactics and what we think might be quite innovative, or hope so at least. So if we have a contested and multi-layered space shaped by a different national linguistic and disciplinary perspective, we also had to develop a hybrid teaching model due to the differences in places where we all were coming from. So what we did, we had a combined online preparation, an intensive 1 week on-site seminar in Lublin, and finally a digital reflection phase on which we can discuss on later if there's any interest and time left. And we had students working in multilingual groups, engaging with sources in several languages at the same time, reflecting the historical complexity of the region itself and from different points of there. Methodologically wise, that meant the course combined elements of an excursion-based learning, a research-based teaching from our side, and collaborative project work from the students with them. And as Friedrich mentioned, the idea was to have a meso level to bridge from graduate students, undergraduate students, up to a research-oriented academic practice, which in itself was quite a challenge and turned out to be things that we did not expect and was very interesting in that. And what we were trying to focus on was the integration of historical experience on the place themselves to change the ideas of the students. Though that means through site visitors of the former concentration camp of Majdanek, which is now a more memorial site with a very nice meeting area for discussion of history and so on. And we encourage the students to get in contact with cultural institutions as museums and actors and persons that are involved in the history of Lublin and all the contracts to not only intellectually but emotionally develop their own standpoints in reflection, especially in the groups themselves. And that worked out very nicely and highly productive. The students rather developed a different approach, not classical papers they wrote about. And since it was an open class, that was really nice for us. And they rather did audio and video podcast formats to reflect on their ideas and concepts. The quality of that was from very high to very different teachers. As you know, it's always a little bit different. But for a first approach, we were really interested in how the students dealt with that. And to make it quick and give room for other discussions, it was organizatorical-wise absolutely nightmarish feeling, since we had to coordinate for bureaucratic entities of 4 different nations and curricula. As you can imagine, that's always fun in itself. Nevertheless, we managed by helping of our university, the University of Vienna, and of course several EU foundings, because these seminars cost a lot of money. Nevertheless, it's good investment money because it's a political project right now at the moment as well. Since we do now give chances to students to meet in times of war, to give them a take off at their times, and nevertheless to have discussions that are very important in academic crowds. And yeah, quick and dirty, the sum up, the course often was an innovative approach for Polish and European studies. It was transnationally, multilingual, and what we wanted to achieve most, it was a critical, reflexive field for the students. And by everything that did not work out as planned, that worked out. And that was what we really liked about it. Thank you for that. And I'm open for questions later on.
Great. Thank you, Friedrich and Christoph. Fascinating course. Our next speaker is Keely Stauter-Halsted. Keely has kindly agreed actually to share her syllabi. So I'm going to try to put that in the chat as I introduce her. Don't know if I can actually share it. I will figure that out as she talks. Keely Stauter-Halsted is professor of history and Haina Family Chair in the history of Poland at the University of Illinois in Chicago, where she teaches a regular undergraduate course on the history of Poland, as well as various seminars related to Polish history. She's the author of The Nation and the Village, The Genesis of Peasant National Identity in Austrian Poland from 2001, and The Devil's Chain, Prostitution and Social Control in Partition Poland from 2015. Her recent work investigates the end of empire in East Central Europe, focusing on refugees, border changes, and population movement in the Polish Second Republic immediately after World War I. Keely, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nicholas. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. Thank you so much for organizing this. This is really a fun opportunity to sort of compare approaches to how we teach this topic. And I'm really very intrigued by the course that we just heard about, where we try to examine spaces as contested and not stable. In a sense, I do the same thing, but I'm working with a completely different population. I was hired to be the historian of Poland at my university. So I teach an undergraduate gen ed course every spring semester. And when it doesn't get taught, if I'm on leave, for example, the Polonia community in Chicago goes crazy and they write the dean and they get in a fuss about it. So it's a course that is it needs to be more fundamental and it can assume less knowledge than a course such as the one we just heard about. That being said, when I first came here 14 years ago now, the course was mostly enrolled by Polonia students who had gone to Saturday school and learned the sacred, holy, heroic history of Poland from their families. And my task, my challenge to begin with was sort of to push back on that and to challenge some of the inherited truths that they had come to the class with, which was sometimes difficult because they had a sense of how things should be. But over the years, the student population has changed a little, and I have students, if they are from Polonia background, they wish to mix it up a little and come up with different interpretations and different focuses, and they mostly seem like they're intrigued when I talk about ethnic minorities or religious diversity or contemporary issues such as women's rights movements and LGBTQ stuff. So what I do is essentially take the 10 centuries of Polish history, which is what the students are expecting, and those who are of Polonia background love the medieval stuff, so I don't feel I can drop that. And I used to use Patrice's book, but in recent years they've stopped reading textbooks, so I don't. But that's the kind of basic fundamental outline is the 10 centuries. But then the course is problem-based. So on one level, I take contemporary problems and I kind of talk about those almost every morning, what's happening in Poland, political, social tensions, the border issues, certainly the war in Ukraine. And then I go backwards from there and I try to talk about the genesis of those things. So, and I do that by looking at discrete problems. So there's 5 papers in the class, and each one is on a particular question or problem in the course, as you'll see. And I'll try to go through that fairly quickly. But as you can see on my screen here, the course actually looks at all these different minority populations, religious dissenters, and it looks at social class. So there's a moment where we examine the way that the Polish nation expanded to include the peasants eventually. And in that moment, there's a discussion of migration and the role that that had in Polonizing the population, which is a good thematic opportunity to pull in students who are of Polonia background and they see themselves in that lesson and they get really engaged. So the idea is kind of to go backwards from contemporary Poland and ask the question of how this sort of contemporary collective memory or collective identity of Polishness and Catholicism has been formed, making it clear that wasn't always the case, obviously, and sort of looking at the incremental steps along the way. And just real quickly, you can see by my assignments here that they, in addition to doing these papers, they also do a 10-minute presentation on a famous Pole that they can, either someone who is famous or should be famous, they can choose somebody from my list, or they can choose a rock star or a contemporary artist or anybody. One woman chose her father, whom she always wanted to interview and wanted to know about his past, and she presented him, and it was awesome. So they really get into it, and it's an opportunity for them to connect with their own discipline, because these are often STEM students who don't know humanities or social sciences well, so they'll do a chemist or an inventor of some type. So that's a nice way to engage them. So go through all this blah, blah, blah that we have to do. I try to make edgy assignments. So very early on in the second week of the semester, we talk about was Mieszko a slave trader? That irritates them, but it's also kind of challenges them a little bit. The first paper, as you can see here, is on witchcraft and Jewish libels, blood libels, in which we discuss the Catholicization of Poland and the way that religious diversity was kind of expelled and from the ground up, how that was treated in local cultures. Second paper is on the Cossack Rebellion. They love some Cossacks, and that is to some extent on Poles as colonial actors and the Polonization of the eastern borderlands. We talk about primitive rebels and sort of conceptual ways of understanding the Cossacks. Are they the genesis of Ukrainian national identity, or are they not? You can also see briefly, I showed them a snippet from 1670. And then we do, as I said, one of the papers is on peasants and migration and why peasants matter in Polish history. There's another paper on the Holocaust and World War II and the kind of challenging memory or the contested memory, the fraught memory of World War II in Poland and how that continues to play a role. And the final paper, similarly, is about communism, everyday life, gender roles, communist nostalgia, and what were to what extent did Poles embrace communism? Is it all evil, or can we actually go back and understand it as a complicated time in Polish history? So that is essentially they write 4 or 5 papers depending on the semester. That's essentially the layout. And then I just wanted to touch on, I just returned from Krakow, where I led a study abroad program about the culture of resistance in Poland, and where we interviewed a number of resistance and activist people who are involved in environmental activism, women's rights, LGBT, gay rights, and then we also toured some historical moments to talk about the kind of continuing tendency to organize resistance in Poland. So that was kind of a nice snapshot. And a lot of them were STEM students who knew nothing about Poland, but they really embraced it in the end. So that's it.
Great, thank you, Keely. Another fascinating course. Our next speaker is Michał Wilczewski. Michał Wilczewski is Associate Professor of Instruction in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures at Northwestern University. At Northwestern, he teaches courses on Polish history, specifically the history of sexuality in Poland and East Central Europe, Polish literature, language, and film. He's currently at work on a book on the history of pornography in early 20th century Poland. Michał, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here really quickly. All right, let's do this. All right. Cool. Nicholas, thanks for putting this together and including me in this. This is really wonderful. It's great to see so many interesting interpretations of how folks are approaching these topics. I got some nostalgia from looking at Keely's syllabus since I was her TA for many, many, many years for that class and got to teach it myself at UIC. And it's cool to see the way that it's evolved over time. I'm going to take a slightly different approach and sort of think a little bit about or talk a little bit about the courses that I get to teach at Northwestern. I'm a historian. I'm trained as a historian. I was hired in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures as sort of, and my colleague Claire Kavanaugh will tell you that there are 1.5 people who work on Poland in our department. I am the whole and she is the half, even though she is the great Claire. But part of that is because she has responsibilities in teaching Russian literature. So I am really responsible for crafting and sort of creating the Polish studies program in our department, sort of however I want. And so given my interest in the history of sexuality and gender and sexuality, that has sort of been one of the ways that I've begun to sort of grow the program. And so I teach 3-ish classes. I've developed 3 classes. I teach 2 of them more frequently than the other that are sort of broadly understood to be about East Central Europe with a preponderance of Polish articles about Poland. And that's, very much thanks to just, I think, like the explosion of studies in history of gender and sexuality in Polish historiography that we've seen in the last decade or so, to the point where I really think like I could probably make this class entirely about Poland at some point if I wanted to. because there's just so much. So I teach an upper division seminar, sort of a 300 level, right, called Sin, Skin, and Spectacle, this sort of larger seminar about the history of sexuality in East Central Europe. I teach a first-year student version of that called Sex in the Slavic World. And the dean wanted me to make sure that I have the word sex in there to get 18-year-olds into the class, right? And then a couple of years ago, I co-created with a colleague in the German department a course on queer lives in East Central Europe. But just because I teach these courses that are specific to the history of gender and sexuality, that doesn't mean that, of course, my other courses don't include gender and sexuality in other ways, right? In my language classes, we talk about gender all the time. Of course, Polish being a very gendered language, but sort of thinking about what that means, particularly for students who are non-binary or trans. In my literature courses, I'm making sure that we teach books and poems and short stories that have to deal with gender and sexuality. And of course, in my film class, students are almost always surprised to see sort of just how much gender and sexuality there is in films from the 1920s and 1930s, right? And they're a little bit surprised at sort of the ways that folks have pushed the limits there. But just to sort of talk about my course goals here, the Sex in the Slavic World, this freshman seminar, has sort of a dual curriculum. On the one hand, it's also about sort of introducing students to the university, what it is to be a college student, and so on and so forth. So there's this sort of primary goal of sort of helping students acclimate to the university. But then, of course, my goal as the professor of this course is to think about and introduce students to the study of gender and sexuality, probably for many of them for the first time in their lives in any sort of systematic way. And part of that means in the first couple of weeks really working to reduce the sense of taboo and perversion that they feel in discussing the issues that we talk about in class and really breaking that down. Of course, learning to analyze sources, and like I said, that first year curriculum. In Sin, Skin, and Spectacle, this is really, I work with trying to break down misconceptions of Eastern Europe. Students are really sort of surprised to see that Poland and the Soviet Union decriminalized homosexuality much earlier than much of Western Europe, right? And so we sort of start to think about and break down what those, how those perceptions of Eastern Europe color and understand, color our understandings of Poland and the region. This course also carries a much larger writing component. It sort of is like the writing intensive course. So it's really about sort of learning to write and crafting arguments using sources. So students write a lot of historiographical papers here. And then in East Central Europe, we really talked about sort of introducing students to the study of queer history. And also giving them a language to use. I think that sort of goes across all of these classes, right? Students sometimes feel a little bit uneasy about what words to use or how to use them. And so really providing students with a language for how to address and discuss gender and sexuality, both historically and in contemporary times, has really become sort of a primary goal over my time as I've been teaching these courses. But most important, and this sort of speaks a little bit to what Keely was talking about, right? Sometimes students come to these classes with certain understandings of what Poland is or what Eastern Europe is, and sort of trying to break down and unlearn some of that. One of my students in the Queer East Central Europe course came up to me after class one day, and she said, Professor, I'm struggling with this class, not because I'm not understanding the material, but because I have to do so much unlearning of what I grew up with, right? And sort of, challenging their own perspectives. And so helping students sort of navigate that process as part of this, and really normalizing gender and sexuality in Polish history, right? I've been accused of teaching bad Polish history because these are the types of topics that I have come to teach, and sort of showing that no, in fact, right, if we only think about these topics through panic, through these lenses of panic or concern, rather than looking at them through desire or sort of normalizing it and recognizing that this is really actually quite a real part of ordinary people's history, that we might be able to sort of come to understand, have a more robust understanding of Poland, and Poles And just assignments really quickly, they change depending on the type of, on the course and what the course goals are. Sex in the Slavic World, because it's this first year seminar, it's mostly reflective, more about what students are learning. Have them do a book review, just to sort of get them thinking about their own learning, which is something that I want them to think about especially as they're first coming into university. Skin and Spectacle, as I said, is more about historiography, more historiographical essays. I break down each week into a particular theme. So if the theme is policing sexuality or queer life or something like that, then I ask the students to take those articles and put them in conversation with one another. And then lots of presentations and comparative essays across the board. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thanks. I'm happy to share my syllabi if folks ever want to see something. Just let me know. Shoot me a message. And that's that.
Great. Thank you so much, Michał, for that fascinating presentation. Our final speaker is Vladyslava Moskalets. Vladyslava Moskalets is a researcher at the Center for Urban History of East Central Europe in Lviv, as well as an associate professor at the Department of History and coordinator of the Jewish Studies program at the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. She was a Fulbright Scholar Fellow at Northwestern University in Chicago in 2018 and 2019, as well as a visiting professor at the University of Illinois Chicago in 2023. Her research interests focus on Jewish social history, Yiddish literature, and Jewish-Ukrainian relations. Floor is yours.
Thank you for introducing me, and I'm very glad to be part of this panel. I already want to participate in all of the courses that were presented. They are absolutely fascinating, and I also can share my syllabus later, and it's available on Academia Edu of each of the instructor. So this is the course which would be very similar to the course that Friedrich presented, because it's also the course which tries to show history of Galicia in this borderland framework, and it was also the course between two universities, so it was taught as a part of the Erasmus cooperation between Bielefeld University and Ukrainian Catholic University in 2024. It was very difficult to navigate the logistics, I agree. The semester in Germany starts 2 months after our semester starts, so we have to squeeze the course and to make it intense, which was a little bit tiresome for us. And also we wanted to have the offline session at the end. It was online, and we wanted to have the meeting of all of the students at the end of the course, but Erasmus rules are very complex, and we were not able to do it, so we mostly met online, and some of the students later went to Bielefeld as a part of other programs. There were 3 professors. I'm only one who is presented here today. So one is Professor Cornelia Konchal from Bielefeld University. The other one was Dr. Jaroslav Żurawlow, who at that time was at Bielefeld University. Now he's at a different place, and I was representing Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. We had a very diverse group of students, because we had in Lviv, it was part of the MA program, which is called the Future of Heritage, and which is dedicated to memory and heritage, and includes people who specialize in philology and history and all. And in Bielefeld it was open to everyone, so we had also undergraduate students and also students who were doing PhDs. It's funny how here I presented it as a part of Polish studies, but some of the students thought this course is part of the Jewish studies, and some of the German students, they applied to it because they wanted to learn more about Ukraine, and they thought it's a course about Ukraine. So it shows that as a scholar of Galicia, I know it all very well, that you can, it's very flexible where does Galicia belong. And we decided to do it in not chronological, structured it not in chronological way. We had these different sessions, very long one, because of the need to make it intense, and we started actually from this question of contested belonging and what is Galicia. It is also very nice because we are Ukrainian part of the students are studying in Lviv, and Lviv is a great example of a contested city. Then we moved to different problems that we tried to show from different angles, and there were religion, which was the session was led by me, migration, political mobilization, violence, city within national discourses, public spaces, and imagination, the image of Galicia, how Galicia was seen from our places outside of Galicia since it varies since the end of 18th century, and the afterlife of Galicia and the different memories, this Polish, Ukrainian, Jewish, Austrian, and whatever memories of Galicia. It was. I think also it was funny that I don't think many of the students didn't have this idea of Galicia before. We didn't have Polish students. Interestingly, I don't know why, but in Bielefeld, I don't know. Maybe Polish students didn't take the course, but we had German. We had someone from Russia. We have one person from South America, and he was the most committed student of Galicia. I was only hope that he applied to this course, not thinking that it is Spanish Galicia, and knowing that it's a Habsburg one. And Ukrainian students were from all over the Ukraine. So I guess they were very open, and they didn't have this idea, like they were not full of stereotypes what Galicia can be, and it was very very interesting. The course mostly consisted of these sessions when we met together and discussed the readings. Since in Ukraine we had this graduate students, the graduate students had to have more readings, so it was pretty intense. And at the end we had so in Germany you cannot grade oral contributions. You have to, so the only thing that we could grade in the seminar, it was final paper, so we have to have paper. And the paper was to take one article about Galicia and one book about Galicia and 3 reviews on the book, and to have this historiographical essay about the reviews and about the article. And in Germany, Bielefeld group had something very nice. It did something very nice that we planned to do together, but they did it alone. They visited Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in near Bielefeld, and it was done to see how this longevity of Galicia works and how this network of cooperation exists even now. So the church was founded by Ukrainian immigrants after I guess I don't remember which exactly period. But it became very very active after the Russian war against Ukraine started. So the church became a place of distribution help and so on. So I have a very nice picture of people with Ukrainian flags, but I don't show them since we are presented it as a Polish studies. And yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So the floor is open now for any questions for the presenters. Thank you all for some really interesting courses. I'd like to go back in time and enroll in all of these if I had the chance. So you can either raise your hand using the raise your hand function, or post your question in the chat if that's more comfortable. Yes, Carolina?
Hi, yes, so thank you for these great, really inspiring courses that I would like to take. I have a question. Since I'm a language instructor, I don't teach Polish, but I'm just interested in what role does language proficiency play? Do students are maybe inspired to learn Polish after the course, or are they doing it simultaneously? Because from what I understand in the course itself, language proficiency doesn't play a major role. It's probably a bonus if students understand some Polish terms or phrases. But yeah, so I'm just interested in hearing a little bit more about language.
Maybe we can go in order of presenters for people who want to respond.
Yes, we can just start, and Friedrich, you just add up. So I just can speak for European University Viadrina. We came from the head of German Polish studies, culture, literature, and gender studies. So there were always a bilingual thing there. On the other hand, we did have quite some difficulties in the class itself because not everyone was speaking Polish, obviously. Not everyone was speaking Ukrainian. And the idea was that the students learn from each other and translate mostly into English, but German as well. So English was the lingua franca, but the idea was that they translate amongst themselves to work through their knowledge and language proficiencies that way.
Yeah, I mean, just perhaps a technical detail. We did have a very diverse group. I mentioned that, and in Vienna, because of institutional, very old institutional parting into branches. I am not teaching too many students from the Institute of Eastern European History, or the history of Eastern Europe, and so I managed to get a group of, I think, 10 to 12 students, which is a lot for such topics when they're not specifically interested in Eastern Europe or the communist East or whatever, what they still have in mind sometimes. And so no proficiency in Polish. So we had to look for texts that are either in English, which is probably the easiest thing. But then we also had, like, if the sources are somehow edited, but then we got signals from the other groups that English might not be the the only language to fall back on. Also because students from Drohobych, they were majoring in Polish, I think, yes, and Lublin in German. So we also tried to we had the not so easy task to find texts that were published or had been published in 2 or 3 languages. Well, we did manage somehow, but that in a way that made it very easy to pick texts because there wasn't so much to pick from anymore. But that was also a very interesting, let's say, an interesting experience in organizing that. But also coming back to what Christoph said, watching these groups of students. So we parted them into international, so international groups. Let's keep it like that for their final assignments. And so they had to approach these texts, could approach these texts in their mother tongues to talk about that, how they perceived, and that was also quite a plus of some kind.
Others want to add?
Mhm. Oh, sure, I can say something. So my regular semester course is a gen ed course. There's no expectation that students would have any Polish background, but it is cross-listed with Slavics. So I get students who have some background linguistically and culturally in Polish. The Polonia students speak less and less Polish. And I know that because I kind of mutter things to them when I mutter Dzień dobry or something, and they'll sometimes look at me confused. So they think of themselves as very Polish, but over the generations, that's kind of waned. The students I had with me in the study abroad program, 3, I think, of them were pretty comfortable in Polish. And somehow the trip began to inspire even the Latinas amongst them to consider taking Polish. So being there seems to have generated a bit of interest linguistically. But no, the readings have to all be in English to the extent that they do their readings. Speaking of which, I wanted to, at some point, if we have time, ask a question about to the others about what assignments work particularly well in their courses, because I'm always looking for some sort of imaginative ways to get students to think about the topics. Thanks.
Michał or Vladyslava, do you want to add anything on the question of language?
Mine is really similar to Keely's, right? I have a couple of students who might be Slavic majors who might have some knowledge of the language, but it's a genetic course, so it has to be available, especially the first year seminar, right? This is just students who are coming in and they have to take a seminar. So yeah, in that sense, it's all English, which then affects the types of things that I can assign, because I would love to assign more primary sources, but so few are translated. So then I end up translating little pieces, but I don't have all the time to be doing, right? Like that's the other thing, right? I need a year off is what I need.
But don't you sometimes inspire kids to take more language classes after they've done your seminar?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten a few folks to become minors because of the seminar, right? So at least they might end up in a language class at some point at some moment. They don't need the language for the minor. They can use language for the minor. So it's sort of depends.
I see. Okay.
Majors wise, have I got any major? I got one major. One student didn't go to Poland, but she studied Russian instead. So I guess that's
just not the same.
That's one. It's not, but it's one win for language, right? So I got one student from North Carolina to study Russian from this seminar, because there's readings on Russia and they're thrown in as well. So
yes, so the students in Ukraine are usually multilingual, so they knew Ukrainian, which is one of the languages, and English at least, to participate in the seminar. But since we had this diverse group, and we decided to have all the text in one language, so all the texts were in English. But people wanted, often people who read something else in some other language, they wanted to contribute and they spoke about it. When I'm teaching Galicia in Ukraine, I give Polish texts, even though people complain, but they can read them, and I try to include them. But in this diverse group, it was difficult to include something in other languages.
I'd like to second Keely's question, actually. I'm really interested in hearing from all of you about the types of materials or texts that students gravitated the most toward. We live in an era when it's becoming more and more difficult to get students to read. But it also seems like there are a lot of written materials that went over really, really well in these courses. So I'm wondering how you design courses in such a way that they still preserve a strong written or reading component, but mix in films or other. I mean, Christoph and Friedrich, for example, mentioned podcasts as an assignment. I'm wondering how you think about designing courses in such a way, given those transformations in student reading habits.
Shall we start? Just like, all right. So for assignments, I think it was a good idea to make it very open, to have those possibilities that they can do audio casts and podcasts and video casts. To be fair, they were not super professional. They are not special producers, but it's the way and the idea how they react with it. One that I liked very much was a fake interview between two specialists about Galicia who proposed different national ideas to each other. And that was a really good one. I liked that very much. On the other hand, it was easier since they were present in the seminar on the places and had a different connection to get into the topics themselves. So if you're at the place, you are more likely to read the texts. And that was my impression. Friedrich, what would you like to add? What is your idea about that?
Yeah, I mean, for this class, I probably cannot add much, but when it comes to reading and writing, I've been experimenting with with something like that I call peer review groups, and I kind of nudge them, if not force them, to read within these groups, read their assignments before they hand it in to me, and I mean have to help them learn to feedback and get feedback, ask for feedback, etc. And this is, I mean, this is probably something that you'd learn in the freshman year in American colleges, which is not the case too much in let's say continental universities. But that is something that they have to learn, and it goes down to I mean the habit of writing longer texts and develop an argument, etc. I mean the very basic stuff, but it's I mean they probably don't have to learn it, but they have to train it, and ChatGPT doesn't help too much. It's a bit very broad, but
Others want to add?
Yeah, I can say something generally about my text. Actually, the edgier the better. So I use, I use film documentaries that have testimonials. I use some memoirs, like a snippet from Memoir of a Village Mayor, just to kind of get them into the nitty-gritty. I use Nathan of Hanover, who talks in the 17th century about the Cossack massacres, which is a very overwritten, overwrought text that is full of hyperbole, but I get them to analyze it and wonder why he uses such gross exaggerations. I use parts of the graphic memoir Marzi for the communist periods to get them to understand kind of everyday life and gender roles under communism. And I do occasionally use Jan Gross and Czesław Miłosz for Holocaust memory. It's dicey, and the Polonia kids used to get pretty upset with it. But honestly, just to get a charge out of them, just to get them, emotionally engaged. And then I often have them write papers that kind of compare either two documents or a primary document and a secondary source, and they have to kind of go through and pick out the nuances between. And the writings are pretty short. These are like 3-page essays because they're gen ed kids, they're STEM kids, and they don't have a lot of time for it. But there's lots of those texts that they need to write for me. And it seems to work if I can get them intrigued by something that is questionable or just overdone or emotional. They will find a way to write a decent analytical essay. The trick is to get them to make an argument, right? And not to just present the facts. So I'm in the process of training them. And then I always have silly things like, the best title competition. Who wrote the sexiest title? And they get I don't know, a cookie or an extra point or something. And it's just a way to kind of get them all engaged, and they seem to really care about this stuff. The other day I was teaching 1918 and sort of the return of Poland to the map, and I had them all take out a piece of paper and sketch what would be their preferred shape of the size of Poland. And they included Canada and Australia, everywhere Poles had ever lived. So, anything, just honestly, it's an hour-and-a-half course twice a week. And by the last half an hour, they're a little groggy. So I just, all these little devices to keep them engaged.
I think one of the things that I do too is, especially in the first year seminar, I do a lot of small group work, and so where they hold one another accountable for having read stuff, right? So when they are walking and when they're talking through questions, then it keeps, I will occasionally notice somebody being like, oh, well, what do you think? Right. And so it engages they engage one another within that. So the dynamic is different from me just sort of randomly calling on someone. And yeah, I mean, the edgier, the better. I luckily get to teach all edgy stuff all the time. So I'm, sometimes it's yeah, they're just always having a good time with it, I think, I hope. And then I think just also bringing it to just recognizing the ordinariness of a lot of this and like the humanity in especially in the stuff that I teach, right? Is a tool that sort of helps them connect that to sort of present day issues and what they're seeing sort of play out contemporarily in politics.
A colleague of mine, Cornelia Konchal, who was teaching this course, she proposed to do this thing which is called one sentence paper, and it's like at the end of each class, everyone had to put everything they learned in one sentence, and it was very funny. And we had like a digital tool to do it, so they don't see what other people write, and everyone writes something original. It was funny.
Other questions?
Just to add on to that, what I did for the study abroad group was to have them sort of keep a journal, which they sometimes didn't do because they were out drinking, but then they have to turn in their reflections to me on each of the major events and speakers. And that's been pretty interesting to kind of get their insights. And then they too got to do presentation on like a famous actor, not even a famous, just any resistance fighter activist personality that they wanted to do in Poland. And again, they found really interesting, sometimes obscure people, but that got them super engaged. So that was a successful assignment.
Other questions? I'm wondering what you all have planned maybe for future courses as well. What directions you anticipate your teaching going in the future, and I mean not just related to the courses that you presented today, but in general when it comes to topics related to Polish studies. What are you most excited about? What do you envision incorporating into courses in the future, even if they're
I
very.
totally want. I want to teach Michał's course. I want to get some sex back in here.
I've been recently thinking a lot about what would it be to do like the history of Poland through ordinary people, and not and I think all of us are sort of doing that to some extent, right? Sort of looking at minorities and things like this rather than sort of the great white men of Polish history, right? But sort of thinking about that more more seriously, right? And sort of taking that more seriously, like what is the people? I mean, right, to the people's history, right? What's the Historia Ludowa of Poland, and how would a course like that play out, right? And how might that help shift and change our understanding of Poland? Yeah.
Do you think you'd have enough documents and sources to do
I mean,
that?
therein lies the
It's,
question,
it's
right?
getting better, right?
It's
Than it
getting
was.
much better,
Yeah.
right? I think it would, would I be able to do sort of the whole, 10 centuries? Probably not, right? But could I do something on like the 19th and 20th? Probably, right? And sort of break it down. Northwestern is on a quarter system, so I have only 9 weeks to do anything, which is both a blessing and a curse, depending on how the class is shaping up. So sometimes you want a class that goes 50, until the full 15-week semester. But unfortunately, I only have about 9.5 to get through stuff. So it, in my own classes, what I would love to do, and I don't do because I started in the 19th century, I really end sort of like in the early post-war. There's just so much good stuff coming out about the later communist period that I really would love to integrate into my work, into my class. So, if I were to revise in my syllabi now, it would probably be to bring it to slightly more contemporary times. But I also just really love the 19th century and the juicy stuff that's there. So it's hard to choose.
Others have thoughts about future courses or directions they want to go in.
Yes, I think I would love to do more stuff with the space with the if I teach Galicia to go on these tours and to go outside of the city and to explore architecture and stuff, which is possible when I'm teaching in Ukraine, which is more complicated if we have these courses with with two universities from different countries. And I was very inspired from what Friedrich and Christoph told about doing podcasts and stuff like this. I guess I would be happy to do it too.
Yeah, if I may, I have tried to do not exactly a follow up, but to use the same funding scheme. It's a Erasmus Plus thing, like the big European things. But as Vladyslava said, it's so difficult to join people from three universities and three different just universities, because the semester starts in Vienna. It starts in March and goes until June, and no student from, I don't know. I tried to do it with a colleague from Darmstadt, close to Frankfurt, the other Frankfurt, and they wouldn't start before I think after Easter, which a year ago was somewhere in late April or something. And then a colleague from Warsaw had very different obligations and expectations, and etc. That's probably the most difficult part to find a week for these people together. But then I'd really love to find a way to bring together what I might call what one might analyze as national perspectives on certain events. So, I mean, I've been working on the German occupation of Poland and resistance, as Nicholas mentioned, and the underground and the occupation and from various perspectives, of course. I mean, there's a Jewish perspective. There might be a Ukrainian, or for sure there is, Lithuanian, etc. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, yeah, the occupation was extended much further than Poland, of course. But I mean, that might be something I'd love to do, but I have been thinking about that, but it's still in the back of my mind. But I think what worked pretty well was bring these people together, these students together who were not experts of some sort or becoming experts on Polish history, but having different disciplinary perspectives and bring them together in teaching, and also finding ways to build an argument and to have them put them into the very awkward position to create a podcast or a paper or a script for a podcast and say, well, I get it, but this is nothing I could say as a historian without putting this and that footnote to it or whatever. Just and that was something that from the what I got from the feedback tool, that was something that they found quite challenging but quite interesting also, not only for their, let's say, scientific career or the research careers, but also from those who were quite sure about not staying in research and training their rhetorical skills, etc.
If I may add up a few sentences. If you want to do another class, let me know, Friedrich. But I think a German, Austrian class of Polish occupation might be a little tricky to get through the Erasmus account. Nevertheless, I would love to bring back a class we had before the war when we were going to the Bruno Schulz Festival in Drohobych, which was the original idea that we had, and which was just a wonderful atmosphere. And it was rather not easy, but it was simpler to arrange. And it was just like a very mind-freeing moment for the students to go to Ukraine, what they didn't do beforehand, and to use a lot of languages, to do it by experience, to read, for example, Bruno Schulz in Polish, in German translation, and in English, and to see it with all the lunatics around there who are fans of Bruno Schulz in that area, which is just like a wonderful moment. And for you, Michał, that would be the wonderful juicy details about Adele and all that stuff. And of course, that would be a wonderful class I would love to bring back. But there still is Lublin, but until the war ends, I don't think we have a chance for that. But it's in my mind.
If I might speak, sorry I came late. I had to give an exam midterm, and I just got out of that. But yeah, I mean, so I think like I don't really teach a Polish history class per se, but I do teach World War classes, and one thing I really do focus on for like the causes of the First World War is the role of irredentism in sort of causing the war and spreading it further and further. So like one course I would love to teach is maybe a comparative irredentism course that could, again, I think this sort of goes to sort of Keely's expansion of like how big should Poland be or what should it include. And one thing I've done before in other classes is sort of give them maps of sort of Central Europe and then have them, try to draw try to draw a map of Poland that would include as many Poles as possible, but still be workable, right? And I mean, to just sort of put them into the place of like sort of these map makers the of the 20th century. But I think sort of also then not just focusing on Poland, but also on Ireland and Greece as well, right? Which are similar in terms of, maximalist claims versus people who sort of see what is politically possible at that time and how it causes civil war and then sort of this political turmoil and changes in governments. And so I think this is something that I would love to teach in the future if I can get around to it.
Jan?
Yeah, thank you for these great presentations. And to add to Winston's point, I think Poland is everywhere where Bigos is. Yeah, so I think Poland is really kind of a big country. Yeah,
lucky
but
actually.
I just wanted to add from my own experience. I'm not teaching right now, but two of my colleagues here at the German Historical Institute, they taught the not exactly Polish history, but they taught Weimar Germany. Yeah. And the idea behind it, they did the code teaching thing. So one Pole, one German. And that was really the add-on. That was what the student, how they got the students here. Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you, because most of you have taught these code teaching things. What is the added value of this? Yeah. I once taught a class, and Winston, you may have heard about it on Wooch, and we had a Polish. I had a Polish colleague doing it together with me, and it really got the students there where we wanted to, right? Because you sometimes have these Polish-German discussions going on in class, and you also have these discussions among the teachers. Yeah, that's probably maybe only working in Europe. I don't know, but I wanted to ask about your experience with these co-teaching formats.
Any thoughts?
Oh.
I think generally I'm not a fan of co-teaching just because I think there's then too many different threads and people have different styles. And I think I also think students sort of get lost too, generally in terms of like, where's this class going? So it might be good to have guest speakers once in a while, but I think keeping it with one main instructor who sort of gives the big themes and the tempo of the course would be good.
When I co-taught the course on queer life in East Central Europe, not only was he a Germanist, but he was also a scholar of literature, and I was a historian. So when we divided things up, it was sort of based on our geographic expertise, but then also the subject matter, right? So that way students could sort of see the different ways that we ask questions about the same stuff that we were reading. And so I might pose, a question about historical context, and then he's posing a question, if we read, I don't know, let's just say we read Mikhail Kuzmin's Wings, right? The 1905, 1906 first gay Russian novel, right? I'm thinking about what is the 1905 revolution doing and how does that affect the publication record of this book and so on and so forth. And then he's asking about characters, right? And sort of and so I think if anything, and I agree, it can get confusing and sometimes people get you get stuck in the mire. But I think on the one hand, I hope at least that it allowed our students to sort of see the way that these interdisciplinary questions can be asked about the same source material in front of us. That I hope was beneficial. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the benefits are that things can be included that I couldn't do on my own. So we had, for example, Lothar Quinkenstein with us, who's a translator yes, translated. I mean, recently he had lots to do with Olga Tokarczuk, and he's very knowledgeable on all that, and also with Bruno Schulz, and so he's translating from Polish into German, and he could beautifully speak about these differences in, like, with Bruno Schulz, for example, in the different languages and the reception, etc. And that really gave the thing something that I couldn't do, and perhaps Christoph, you could have done, but I don't know. I mean, this is something that a guest speaker could also do. But I think the very important thing is to make it about these different perspectives, which as well comes with the I don't know, the downside that is that it most certainly does not mean half the work if you co-teach, but rather double it, because so much work has to be put into the design and the outline. But if that works, I think especially for I mean, for something like this, these excursion things, when it's much more work anyways, then it is certainly worthwhile. Not for a very general introduction course, so that might be too much, but I mean, depending on when all papers are written, then.
Yeah, if I may add up to that, I think the benefits are easier to grasp for students, especially if you have interdisciplinary students in one class. Then you really can up on them, and then you have to mix the groups, that you do not only have the co-teaching styles, but the students from two different or more fields that act it out. And especially if you work, for example, in a good cop, bad cop situation, and you change the positions sometimes, it's a very productive way to, for example, give a political studies perspective into it and make it the hard one, or the historical perspective and the other one around, and challenge the students from each field and to change it the other way around. Then, I mean, it's really a lot of work, but it works out fine. The arguments the students have after that will lead them through their whole studies, I think. So that's the big benefit on our work experience, of course, in life.
We have other questions? Okay, I know some of us have run a little bit early, so we might call it there. But as Carolina mentioned at the beginning of the talk, we'd love to organize more of these sorts of teaching roundtables in the future. So stay tuned, and thank you all for participating in such an interesting, lively discussion.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Thank you, Nicholas, for organizing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you
So much.